It was August 5, 1976, when the People's Daily printed the sentiments of Chairman Mao. The everyday citizens of China were avidly reading for the daily morsels of wisdom from the chairman, but this was like nothing before. Inside the text was a frightening inference. The Chinese government had been infiltrated by the bourgeoisie. The proletariat progress and revolution was under threat, and the intended message was in the title: bombard the headquarters. From city centers to rural communes, the citizens of China would have felt an unquestionable chill in the air. The revolution to follow would take a long decade, be littered with rampaging bloodshed nationwide, and even descend into the madness of cannibalism. Welcome to History on Fleek. Today we examine the most brutal punishments of Maoist China. Mao Zedong was the founder of the People's Republic of China and its chairman from 1949 to 1976 following his death. A profound nationalist and anti-imperialist, he took to Leninist, Marxist ideology following a stint at Peking University, where he became one of the founders of the Chinese Communist Party. From 1927 to its end in 1949, Mao Zedong would lead the Chinese Communist Party in an on and off war with the Chinese government. And most importantly, he would succeed. While Mao, without a doubt, was the fire to start a revolution, the revolution itself was wholly harmful to China. His rabid pursuit of industrialization and modernization would bring mass suffering and poverty across the nation. The Cultural Revolution he would birth littered a nation with murder, humiliation, and persecution for the 10 years leading up to his death. Yet his cult of personality essentially took over the nation in the decade from 1966 to 1976. Mao had enacted many policies, but most of which had only caused great economic harm to China. Following his death, his successor, Deng Xiaoping, would substantially turn around the country's fortunes. This was done in the majority by reversing most of Mao's policies, and in particular, forbidding any cult of personality. There is no tale of Mao Zedong's leadership more punishing on the Chinese population than the Great Leap Forward. In the mold of Stalin's industrialization, the Great Leap Forward was a series of radical policies to turn a majority agricultural nation into an industrialized one. Yet it must be said, Mao Zedong may not have quite read the small print on Stalin's industrialization, namely that it was an absolutely brutal experience for the masses, to the point that it cost lives. The campaign on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party ran from 1958 to 1962. It followed much of the blueprint that had been seen in Communist Russia before the Second World War. The rural population of China, much like their Russian counterparts, had their lives turned inside out. Private farming was instantly outlawed, and any resisting were given the pariah status of counter-revolutionaries. All counter-revolutionaries were liable for prosecution. In order to multiply the grain yields, private farms were disbanded for collective state farms, and all households were forced to comply. Communes were set up for the workers, and wages were replaced by work points. In other areas of industry, such as steel production, huge targets that were set much like the agricultural ones could not possibly be met. The result was a giant updraft in steel workers, which peaked at around 50 million. This, in turn, nearly upended China's food rationing system. As the expansion of steel production only continued, there were serious problems with coordination and materials shortage. Amazingly, backyard steel furnaces were encouraged in every commune. Without the know-how of metallurgy, predominantly left to the workings of peasants, the output resulted in pig iron most of the time. After 2 years, such a measure was abandoned. The overall goal of the Great Leap Forward was to surpass the United Kingdom within 15 years. The reality was, most of these measures did not work out and were abandoned within 2 to 4 years. Mao had all the sentiment and standing of an arch-collectivist, but refused the input of savoir-faire of experts or specialists. Once again, in mirroring their Russian counterparts, the higher-ups did not have the interest of heart to tell Mao of the disaster unfolding across the nation. Starting entire industries with no prior knowledge of them and placing the greatest burden on the peasant underclass had giant consequences. The result of the Great Leap Forward was the Great Chinese Famine, the second largest in recorded history. It is estimated that 15 to 55 million people died as a result of the Great Leap and its impossible demands on the people. The use of propaganda in Maoist China was a potent weapon in upholding political repression. After 1949, the use of any means of mass communication possible was part and parcel of the political repression. This meant film, television, print media, and the arts, including music and plays, but most notably, the People's Daily, the CCP's official newspaper. Using media controls to affect the minds of the masses was at its most potent during the Cultural Revolution. It is during this time that Mao Zedong's cult of personality took hold and gave a path to the mass violence found across the nation. Mao's face was printed on the cover of the People's Daily, and quotes from him would be printed alongside per day. While there is no doubt political repression is as much about deflecting any alternative views, this was an unrelenting effort to ingrain the communist paradigm into the public psyche. Each Chinese citizen was given a book of quotes from Chairman Mao, the Little Red Book. They were expected to carry it with them at all times and be reciting from it as a daily habit. Mao Zedong didn't just enact great economic and industrial changes, but major cultural ones too. Formerly called the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, the movement was little more than a concerted effort to uphold communism in the face of capitalist and traditional sentiments across the country. It is entirely arguable the Cultural Revolution may not have been, or certainly not have been so fervent, had the Great Leap Forward been such a failure resulting in mass famine. Claiming the government had been infiltrated by bourgeois influences, in 1966, Mao Zedong called on the country's youth to make the class enemies of the CCP their own. What resulted was the formation of the Red Guards, student paramilitary groups geared up with the steel drive a cult of personality can bring. This may not surprise you to hear, but what followed was nationwide violent carnage and chaos. As for the death toll, we still can't say for sure. The best estimation is hundreds of thousands, tipping into the millions. Massacres began to take place across China. Most chillingly, the Guangxi massacre, which took some 100 to 150,000 lives, had extensive instances of cannibalism. Yes, cannibalism. And there was no famine in Guangxi. This was people out to destroy a perceived enemy and literally eating them alive. It's come to be understood that thousands of people participated in cannibalism at Guangxi. Thankfully, it wasn't all cannibalism. There were plenty of other means to suppress enemies. Universities and schools were closed. Educated youths from the cities were sent to the countryside, an estimated 10 million or so. Tens of millions faced persecution for being part of the 5 black categories: right-wingers, rich farmers, landlords, counter-revolutionaries, and bad influences. Intellectuals, senior officials, including President Liu Shaoqi, and millions more faced prison, torture, public humiliation, hard labor, or property seizure. At its worst, the Cultural Revolution would execute its enemies or harass them into suicide. Disturbingly, Chairman Mao's cruel policies have not been entirely lost over time. While the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution show the same DNA as the revolutions of Leninist and Stalinist Russia, there is one more policy that does quite the same. The Laogai system in China, founded in 1949 under Chairman Mao, is pretty much the Chinese equivalent of the Gulag archipelago of Soviet Russia. The network of penal labor and prison farms stand under criminal justice, but have been used for the reformation and re-education of its prisoners. Not so surprisingly, the system was constructed with the assistance of the Soviets. The camps stand as prisons for common criminals and those who have been deemed a danger to the state, be it opposing the government, its policies or officials, or just following a religion the government isn't in support of. Yep, this is the Gulag network, but out in China. Founded under the leadership of Chairman Mao, some 40 to 50 million people are estimated to have suffered in the Laogai. Much like its Russian counterpart, the inhumane treatment of prisoners remains intact. Beatings, starvation, long hours of forced labor, and mental torture. The death count is presumed to be in the tens of millions. The Laogai stands to this day, yet is shrouded in secrecy. While it was renamed and allegedly repurposed in 1994, the Laogai, to any provincial understanding, operates much the same. Al Jazeera's attempted expose in 2012 resulted in their expulsion from China that very year. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.